Wow. Status report for tomorrow's game versus Los Angeles. Caitlin Clark out.
Damn. Unbelievable. Just absolute, pure, unfiltered chaos right now. Stephanie is out. Adam Silver steps in. Look at those reactions pouring in across every single platform. Millions of fans collectively losing their minds because the unthinkable just became reality. The headline hitting the wire right now is sending absolute shockwaves through the entire sports world, shattering the fragile illusion of autonomy in the WNBA front offices and exposing the massive billion-dollar fault lines underneath the surface of this league. We are looking at a mid-season decapitation of a coaching staff, a total override of the standard operational hierarchy, and a commissioner finally pulling the emergency brake on a runaway train that was heading straight for a financial cliff. Let's put this in context. The Indiana Fever are not just playing another regular season basketball game right now. They are operating within what is undeniably the most highly anticipated, financially consequential, and heavily scrutinized stretch of professional basketball in the entire multi-decade history of women's sports. We are talking about a prime-time, nationally televised spectacle, simulcast across ESPN, ABC, and multiple high-tier streaming platforms, with millions upon millions of casual and hardcore eyeballs tuning in specifically to watch one singular, transcendent, generational talent operate on the hardwood. The stakes are no longer just about playoff seeding or local market pride. The stakes are the entire economic foundation of the league moving forward. Every single commercial break, every single sponsored segment, every single high-priced ticket sold in massive arenas across the country is tied directly, inextricably, to the presence, the health, and the performance of Caitlin Clark. And what does Stephanie White do in the middle of a critical, tightly contested game with the entire world watching and the financial future of the league hanging in the balance? She benches the Golden Goose. She pulls the single most important asset in the history of the franchise, the very reason the lights are on and the cameras are rolling, and sits her down on the pine in a move that defied all logic, all basketball strategy, and all basic financial sense. This wasn't just a minor rotation tweak to buy a minute of rest. This was a deliberate, calculated statement. And it was a statement that immediately triggered a catastrophic drop in live viewership, a tidal wave of social media outrage, and, ultimately, a direct, unprecedented intervention from the absolute highest possible authority in the sport of basketball. Adam Silver, the man who oversees the NBA and ultimately holds the absolute highest leverage over the WNBA's financial lifelines and operational subsidies, reportedly saw enough of the self-sabotage. When the national broadcast cut to a visibly frustrated, bewildered Caitlin Clark sitting on the bench, while the Fever offense completely stagnated into an unwatchable, disjointed, chaotic mess of isolation ball, the phones in the New York League offices started ringing off the hook. You have to understand the sheer magnitude of this moment. The network executives, the billion-dollar corporate sponsors, the people actively paying hundreds of millions of dollars for exclusive broadcasting rights, do not pay for Stephanie White's defensive schemes or her rigid adherence to locker room hierarchy. They pay for the logo threes, the spectacular no-look passes, the transition gravity, and the unprecedented, undeniable magnetism that Clark commands the exact second she steps her foot across half-court. By benching her in that highly visible moment, White wasn't just making a questionable coaching error. She was committing what practically amounts to financial sabotage against the very corporate partners who are desperately trying to elevate the league to the next level. Now, we're getting to the heart of it. Look at the hard evidence on the floor before the benching even occurred, because the context makes the decision even more inexcusable. Name every single player out there on the court during that stretch. You have veteran guards trying to force inefficient isolation plays against double teams. You have post players completely sealed off in the paint, unable to establish position. And you have wings routinely missing critical defensive assignments in transition. And instead of holding those established veterans accountable for blown defensive coverages, missed rotations, and an absolute refusal to run the offensive sets, the coaching staff targets the rookie. They target the one player who is actively generating 80% of their offensive momentum. The one player drawing double and triple teams to create open looks for everyone else. It is a terrifying pattern we have seen escalate week after week, game after game. In almost any other jurisdiction, in any other professional, multi-million-dollar corporate structure, deliberately placing your primary revenue driver in a position to fail meets the exact definition of gross negligence. You do not sideline the central economic pillar of your entire organization to prove a petty point about who controls the locker room. When Clark was subjected to brutal, borderline flagrant physical contact earlier in the very same quarter, unwarranted cheap shots, hip checks away from the ball, and reckless closeouts that the officials met with absolute deafening silence, the coaching staff did absolutely nothing to protect her. They didn't call a timeout to yell at the referees. They didn't run an enforcer onto the floor. They just sat there and watched. The medical framing of this sustained physical abuse is absolutely terrifying. You are actively allowing your franchise player to absorb dangerous accumulated physical trauma, forcing her to constantly compensate her shooting and landing mechanics to avoid injury due to poor spacing and a complete lack of enforcer protection from her own teammates. And then, when she inevitably shows justifiable human frustration at being battered with no whistle, you penalize her by pulling her from the floor. Every single non-response from the officials, compounded by the punitive, retaliatory benching from the head coach, amplifies the deep injustice of the situation. It elevates what could be dismissed as a bad sports moment into documented systemic harm against a player who is quite literally carrying the entire financial viability and cultural relevance of the league squarely on her shoulders. The fans have spoken, and the reaction across the internet is absolutely nuclear, completely eclipsing the game itself. Listen to this raw testimony pouring in. I drove 6 hours across 3 state lines and paid $800 for lower bowl tickets solely to watch Caitlin Clark, not to watch Stephanie White try to prove she's the ultimate boss of a losing franchise. I demand a full refund from the league immediately. This is consumer fraud. Here is another one, perfectly capturing the escalating anger at the system. The WNBA fundamentally hates its own success. They are actively, purposely trying to destroy the only reason any of us are finally watching. Adam Silver had to step in because these localized, small-minded front offices are completely incompetent and have no idea how to handle a global superstar. And the outrage just gets worse as you scroll. The ultimatums are rolling in by the tens of thousands, flooding the league's official accounts. Cancel my League Pass subscription immediately. I am completely boycotting this franchise and this league until they completely clean house. You do not punish generational greatness just to protect the fragile egos of mediocre veterans who have never sold out an arena in their lives. There is a dark, cynical humor to it now, with fans tweeting things like, "At this point, just trade her to an NBA team. She would genuinely get more respect, better physical protection, and actual playing time from Steve Kerr or Eric Spoelstra than she does from her own staff in Indiana." And then you hit the most extreme, but entirely understandable, reactions from the most dedicated supporters. Fire the entire front office tonight. Investigate the general manager for organizational sabotage. Arrest whoever signed off on pulling her in the fourth quarter of a nationally televised game. It is a literal bait and switch to advertise her face on every billboard and then bench her when the game matters most. They are not wrong, and that is what makes this so dangerous for the league. When you buy a highly priced ticket to a marquee, universally advertised event, there is an implicit financial and social contract between the consumer and the provider, and the Fever organization broke that contract live on national television. Connect the dots backwards, because the timeline is suspicious enough to make even the most rational observer start asking very uncomfortable questions about the systemic rot inside the league. Who actually benefits from Caitlin Clark being diminished, humbled, or forced to take a humiliating back seat? Look closely at the coaching tree. Look at the entrenched old guard of the WNBA, the established veteran players, and the deeply interconnected network of coaches and executives who have completely controlled this league for over 2 decades in relative, quiet obscurity. There is a deep, palpable, systemic resentment toward the unprecedented, blinding spotlight, the sudden implementation of chartered flights, the massive multi-million-dollar shoe deals, and the massive, overwhelming influx of millions of new fans who frankly do not care about the league's history, but only care about its immediate future. What prior, unstated relationships exist between the officials who are consistently swallowing their whistles on egregious fouls and the coaching staffs who are outright refusing to challenge those non-calls? What legacy media entities and broadcast partners have been suspiciously silent, or even openly hostile, aggressively defending the benching as a necessary character-building learning moment for an arrogant rookie, instead of accurately calling it out as the brand-destroying, financially catastrophic disaster it actually was? Notice how the traditional legacy media analysts instantly rushed to the defense of Stephanie White's supposed culture building and accountability, while completely, willfully ignoring the glaring statistical fact that the television ratings and crowd energy plummeted into the absolute abyss the exact second Clark sat down. You never want to claim a massive conspiracy directly, because that sounds crazy. But fans are looking at the evidence and asking totally valid questions. And you have to wonder what changed the moment the spotlight got too bright for the establishment to control. There are massive, deep-seated financial and ego-driven incentives at play for the old guard to aggressively maintain their grip on the league's narrative, to ensure that absolutely no single player ever becomes bigger than the institution itself. But they completely miscalculated the leverage. They forgot who actually pays the bills now. Here is where it gets even more complicated, and why Adam Silver's reported intervention is the literal nuclear option come to life. The demand for accountability cannot simply stop with a single flashy headline or a temporary suspension. The demands from the infuriated fan base, and more importantly, from the terrified financial backers, are specific, and they are feeling increasingly inevitable. Fire Stephanie White immediately for the specific, inexcusable failure of alienating the single most important player of this entire sports generation, and actively jeopardizing the long-term health and valuation of the franchise. Remove the general manager by the end of the week for the catastrophic cultural failure of building a fundamentally flawed roster and hiring a coaching staff that is completely incompatible with the fast-paced, high-volume style of play absolutely required to maximize a generational, transformative talent. Replace the current WNBA commissioner with an external visionary, someone who will actually mandate the strict physical protection of star players, rigorously enforce flagrant foul rules with heavy fines and suspensions, and finally recognize that the league is entirely in the mainstream entertainment business, not the bitter, localized ego preservation business. The nuclear option is exactly what we are seeing unfold in real time. Bring in Adam Silver. Bring in the ruthless, profit-driven NBA executives to completely and forcefully take over the basketball operations and definitively override the localized, small-minded incompetence that is currently holding this entire massive product back. Fans are explicitly, aggressively stating they would rather see the Indiana Fever franchise completely dissolved and relocated. They are entirely willing to lose their own beloved star player to free agency or a forced trade demand if it means she ultimately lands somewhere infinitely safer, somewhere run by actual serious professionals who intimately understand exactly what is at stake. The current situation is completely, fundamentally unsustainable. We are talking about the entire economic foundation of women's professional basketball teetering on the edge of a cliff. If you destroy this player, whether it happens slowly through accumulated, unchecked physical trauma that the league willfully ignores, or through the grinding psychological attrition from a jealous coaching staff that absolutely refuses to empower her, you destroy the entire league. All the unprecedented progress evaporates overnight, like it never even happened. They will be right back exactly where they started just a few short years ago, playing in empty, cavernous arenas, generating zero meaningful television revenue, and fading back into absolute cultural irrelevance. Restate exactly what was miraculously built this season: the private chartered flights, the sold-out NBA-sized stadiums, the massive multi-billion-dollar media rights deals currently being negotiated. Who built that? It wasn't the bitter old guard. It wasn't the traditional slow-paced coaching philosophies. It certainly wasn't the league executives who failed to market the game for 20 years. It was Caitlin Clark. She is the golden goose. If she is lost to injury, frustration, or burnout, the entire fragile ecosystem collapses in on itself. The commissioner's prolonged silence up to this breaking point has been a blatant line of complicity. Think about the direct NBA contrast. If this were a young LeBron James in his highly anticipated rookie season in Cleveland, and head coach Paul Silas decided to arbitrarily bench him in the fourth quarter of a massively hyped, nationally televised primetime game just to teach him a petty lesson about seniority, all while he was getting physically battered by opposing defenses with no foul calls, Adam Silver, or David Stern at the time, would have had the front office on the phone before the final buzzer even sounded. The coach would be cleaning out their office the very next morning. The league office would have immediately issued massive fines, mandated comprehensive referee reviews, and completely overhauled the physical environment to protect their billion-dollar asset. By that exact proven standard of professional sports management, the WNBA leadership has failed absolutely spectacularly, which is exactly why the absolute highest power in the sport had to violently step in and drop the hammer. Stephanie is out is just the very beginning of the shockwave that is about to level this league's front offices. The ultimate rhetorical question isn't whether the millions of newly invested fans are overreacting to a single benching. The real terrifying question is whether the rest of the league's stubborn, entrenched front offices will finally wake up and react at all before it's entirely too late, or if they will just sit back with their arms crossed and proudly watch the greatest, most lucrative gift they have ever been handed burn completely to the ground. Prompt 1. Ultra-realistic news thumbnail image. A tense, dramatic view from a luxury stadium suite looking down at a basketball court. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver stands in the foreground, sharp focus, wearing a dark tailored suit, looking furious and pointing down towards the WNBA bench. In the blurred background, WNBA coach Stephanie White looks shocked, holding a clipboard. Cinematic lighting, breaking news aesthetic, high tension, photorealistic, 8K resolution. Prompt 2. A highly realistic, dramatic sports photography scene. Caitlin Clark, sitting alone at the end of the team bench, looking visibly frustrated with a towel around her neck. In the immediate foreground, out of focus, the back of a coach's head, Stephanie White, looking away,